Hi, welcome back to EducateTube.com. My name's Sipsky, your host. Today I want to talk about camera gimbals. I actually own two of them. I have the Pilotfly H1 Plus and the DJI Ronin S. Now, I'll tell you how I feel about these gimbals and generally about gimbal itself. Why I have this love and hate relationship with gimbals. I don't think they're the most essential equipment, but they can help in certain situation. For example, if you want a smooth, stabilized image or video, then yes, this is very important. But there is the caveat behind having these gimbals, and I'll talk about it right now. Now, I own this gimbal, especially the Pilotfly H1 Plus, for over a year now. I essentially use it a couple of times when I'm out in the field, run and gun situation. I find that it's not as great as I thought. The one thing I realize is that once you balance it on a particular camera, for example, this Pilotfly H1 Plus, I use it on my Sony A5000 or A5100. Once you stick with one camera, you don't want to take it out from the gimbal itself, because the one thing I don't like about these camera gimbals is that you need to have at least 10, in fact 20 minutes to balance it every time you use it, because you never know, right? Like, you don't want to assume that it's going to be balanced once you use it. So one thing to avoid rebalancing it properly is to make sure you use the same camera on the gimbal. So if you assign, for example, the Sony A5000 or A5100 on the Pilotfly H1, then that's it. You stick with that, and then if you were to, put it on the gimbal, you just bounce a little bit, and it's ready to go. Same thing with the Ronin S. Now the Ronin S is a little better because it has a very powerful motor, so it can handle a bit more weight. For example, I balanced my Sony A7R III on it. Now I just recently added the grip, so again I have to rebalance that. So you have to stick with the same camera on the gimbal system. So if I'm going to use the Sony A7R III on this DJI Ronin S, then this is the only camera I'm going to be using, so that when I try to balance it, it's not going to take that long, because it's already pretty much 90% balanced. I just need to adjust it a little bit with the plate and everything, and it's ready to go. So that's very important to note, that if you have a camera, use that particular camera on the gimbal. Don't switch different camera on it. It's going to be very hard to balance. Number two, I find that certain gimbals drain more battery than other. Like, they have a smaller battery, or maybe they have smaller motor, so, and they don't last as long. So this one, for example, the Pilotfly H1 Plus, lasts about 90 minutes when I put my Sony A5100 on it. So I have to make sure that I don't use it so often, because only lasts for 90 minutes. Whereas the DJI Ronin S is very good. It can last for 8 to 12 hours, even on the Sony A7R III. Now, without the grip, of course. Now, if I have a grip, then it might last a bit less because of the weight, and it has that more flexibility, right? Because of the bigger motor. If I were to rate these two gimbals, this one, that's another thing. When I first got this gimbal, the Pilotfly H1, it was quite expensive. If all the gear that I invest in, I find that the gimbal was my worst investment. Okay, I'll tell you right now, because this one I bought for quite expensive, and I kind of regret, in the sense that when it first came out, it was the latest greatest stuff, and then you end up buying and you think it's great, and then it's okay. It just takes some time to balance and all that stuff. So I spent a lot of money on this gimbal, and I don't think I use it as much, and I find that it's not as great or useful as I thought it was supposed to be. Anyway, this one, however, the DJI Ronin S, this is a better investment. It's actually almost 30% cheaper than the Pilotfly H1. Again, this is an earlier technology, that's why it's more expensive. But I find the Ronin S is quite good in terms of price and performance. If I were to rate it, I would have gave the Pilotfly H1 6.5 out of 10, and this one 7.5 plus out of 10. Now why I say plus is because I was able to put on my Sony FS700R on this camera, which is amazing because you know how big those video cameras are, right? So they're quite big. This one, the FS700 series, are able to be stabilized on this DJI Ronin S. Okay, next time maybe I'll show you how I did it. It's I had to use a special plate that I put together and able to get it to work. Number three, very important about gimbals is that you have to make sure that your camera is set to 60 frames per second at least. Okay, so for example, my Sony A5100, I set it to 60 frames per second, and what I'll do is I'll slow it down to 24 frames per second because these two gimbals, and I don't know if there's a gimbal out there that's handheld that's able to adjust the Z-axis, you know, the up and down. It shows up in the video. Okay, no matter how good these gimbals are, I find that that up and down is there. The technique is if you set it to 60 frames per second or higher, then you can actually get rid of that by slowing down the frame. Of course, the only problem with it is that when you're doing in real time, like as I'm talking, the voice is also slowed down as well. So it's not great for that situation, unless of course if you are the one who's actually the camera operator and you're focusing on the speaker, and then you can move along with it and it doesn't look like it's shaking because it's relative to that person, okay, or the actor or actress, then that's fine. But however, if you're doing your you know, vlogging and you're holding it, again, as long as you can see it, then it's okay. But if you're moving on a scene, you can actually see it moving up and down. Now you can try different walking techniques that might help, but the best technique that I found is that, other than of course make sure you walk properly, slow down, steady, make sure you set your frame rate at 60 frames per second or higher. I would recommend 120 frames per second. And then what you do is you slow down at 24 frames per second, and then you get a very, very smooth shot. That's the technique. Maybe next time I'll show you how I do that with these gimbals, but that's my 3 tips. Thanks for watching EducateTube.com.